It's my lifetime dream to be shot by Zack Snyder in slow motion. One day it has to happen before
yes.
I die.
Absolutely.
Can we make that
we'll
promise?
Make it happen.
Thank you so much for your
I
time
promise.
and thank you for being here in Mexico.
Okay, my pleasure. Thank you.
It's incredible how you make everyone look amazing.
When I found you in the wreckage of that ship, I considered leaving you. I was afraid you could bring trouble to us.
First of all, thank you for having me and welcome to Mexico. I feel great to say that now.
No, thank you for having me and I love being here.
And you know, I love the film, first off.
Oh, thank you.
And I wanted to ask you, when you first wrote this story back in the day, what was that what if question that came to your head? And now that you are releasing it and that you've made it, what does it say about you as a storyteller?
I think that first of all, the thesis of the movie in a lot of ways for me was to sort of realize this sort of building of this sci-fi world and, tell this story about these soldiers who are going on a, quest for redemption. But in the end, I think what I got was everything was a little more complicated than I thought. The characters came to life, became more complicated. Cora has all these issues and she's trying to work through it and I'm trying to help her. And, what you find is that what you think is simple and you just want to tell a simple story, which is fine, becomes very complex and becomes, especially when people start to inhabit the skin of those characters. And then they bring all their questions and all their insecurities and everything, which makes them amazing. So I think that what I learned was that, it's never simple, it always becomes more complicated. I think, was there a second part that I missed?
No? Well, what does the story say about you now?
Oh, say about me now. And I think it's exactly that I've kind of, that me along with the film have grown and evolved and learned about each other. So it's cool.
And you have all these characters that are amazing. And I'm guessing when you're working with these actors, do they ask you questions that you probably never asked yourself?
Oh yeah, that's what I mean. Absolutely. They're constantly saying well, what about this? And I'm like, oh geez, you're right. It's a good point.
Think about that.
Yeah. But the good news is, because we did a lot of the work in advance, as far as the sort of mythology and sort of completion of the world building, I would often have an answer that they'd be like, oh, okay. Wow, okay, you really have been thinking about this too long.
Of course.
It's probably true.
You wrote the story.
Well, yeah.
You know it better than anyone else.
This one, yeah.
We're just farmers. We're not a threat. They won't just kill us, will they?
There's one thing I love about Rebel Moon, which is that the robots are sometimes even more human than human beings.
Yeah.
How did you manage to do that? What was the key to nail that?
Well, it's funny because we've been working on this sort of Jimmy mythology for quite a while. And the Jimmies are so particular. I really wanted them not to be, people are like, oh, they're like AI. I'm like, I think it's beyond that. They're just, we gave them a consciousness and sort of a morality. Their morality and their consciousness were hooked together and we said, okay, this is who you are. Just it happens with everybody, if you're brought up, say you're brought up in a really religious household or you're brought up in a really scientific, whatever it is, you suddenly wake up one day and you're like, oh, this is what I think. This is what the world is to me. And I think that's what the robots are in our movie. This is what the world is to them. It's not programming, it's what the world is.
I love it. And one thing that I love about all of your films is the action scenes. They're always on point. What are the kind of details that you really need to put attention to in order to make them as realistic as possible?
Well, I guess, I'm I guess for the action in my mind to work, there's a few things that it has to be able to do. It has to tell a sort of short story on its own. That is to say, if you use the granary, for examples, right? Cora shows up. These guys, they have no idea. They think she's a farmer, and we, the audience, think she's a farmer too. We know a little suspicious, but something's up with her, but we don't know. So that's the sort of beginning of the story. Middle of the story, she's clearly good at fighting. So for me, the middle of the story, the second part of it is the attention to detail that I always try and have as far as the reality of what's physically possible, right? Okay. Stretched a little bit, but I understand. I do a little fighting and I have shot a lot of guns and I'm a sort of student of that sort of physical. I've always been interested in that. And so the logic of the action is an important thing. You can break it so easy by going a little too far or not going far enough. You know, it's tricky. And so I just try and do it to my aesthetic, and it seems to work out okay. And then in the end, that the final act, that there be a reveal or some kind of why of it, the fighting. You know, in our case, a few things. Cora has to like face the reality of what she's done to the villagers. You know, they wanted to surrender, and or Jimmy has made a decision and sort of chosen a side in that briefest of moments. You know, so there's a lot of things at play. You know, and I think that there's a version of that for almost every action scene.
It's a new age for the universe.